At the company dinner, my boss laughed and said, "You'll never lead a team. Now he works for me." The memory still burned with perfect clarity, even 5 years later. I could see Richard Morrison's face across the table at Romano's, his expensive suit jacket draped over his chair, his third glass of wine making him more honest than he'd ever been in the office. The annual company dinner was supposed to be a celebration of our achievements, a chance for the team to bond outside the sterile environment of Hartwell and Associates. Instead, it had become the night that changed everything. "Sarah," Richard had said, cutting into his steak with the precision of a man who'd never doubted his place in the world, "you're a fantastic analyst. Really, one of the best we've had. But leadership? That's a different skill set entirely." I'd been 28 then, 3 years out of business school. Hungry for advancement and naive enough to believe that hard work and intelligence were enough to earn respect. I'd just finished presenting my proposal for restructuring the client acquisition process, a plan that would eventually save the company $2 million annually, though Richard would take credit for implementing it. "I think I could handle more responsibility," I'd said carefully, aware that the entire senior management team was listening. "The Morrison account has been my project from the beginning, and the client specifically requested that I continue as their primary contact." Richard had laughed then, not the polite chuckle of professional disagreement, but the dismissive bark of someone who found the very idea amusing. "Sarah, you're missing the point. Leadership isn't about being smart or hardworking, it's about commanding respect, making tough decisions, having the presence to walk into a room and take control." He'd gestured with his wine glass, sloshing burgundy dangerously close to the rim. "You're too, soft. Too accommodating. You'll never lead a team because you don't have the killer instinct it takes." The table had gone silent. I could feel the eyes of my colleagues on me, some sympathetic, others calculating, all of them waiting to see how I'd respond to being publicly humiliated by the man who controlled my career trajectory. "I see," I'd said quietly, my voice steady, despite the humiliation burning in my chest. "Thank you for the feedback." Richard had smiled, satisfied that he'd put me in my place. "Don't take it personally, Sarah. We all have our strengths. Yours just happened to be in analysis and support, not leadership." The conversation had moved on to other topics. Quarterly projections, the upcoming merger talks, Richard's vacation plans for his new yacht. But I'd sat there in silence, mechanically eating my dinner, while something fundamental shifted inside me. That night, lying awake in my studio apartment, I'd made a decision that would define the next 5 years of my life. Richard Morrison thought I lacked the killer instinct for leadership. He was about to discover just how wrong he could be. Now, 5 years later, I sat in the corner office that had once been Richard's, reviewing the personnel files for my new team. The irony wasn't lost on me that Richard's file was among them. He'd been restructured into a senior analyst position, reporting directly to me when the company was acquired by Meridian Capital 6 months ago. The acquisition had been my idea, my deal, my victory. I'd spent 3 years building relationships with Meridian's executives, demonstrating the value that Hartwell and Associates could bring to their portfolio, positioning myself as the obvious choice to lead the integration. When the papers were signed, I'd been named regional director, overseeing not just my old department, but 3 others as well. Richard had been given a choice: accept the demotion or find another job. He'd chosen to stay, probably because his lifestyle required the salary and he was too proud to admit he'd been outmaneuvered by the woman he'd once dismissed. As lacking leadership potential, my assistant knocked on the door, interrupting my thoughts. "Ms. Chen, Mr. Morrison is here for his 3 o'clock meeting. Send him in, please." Richard entered my office with the careful composure of a man trying to maintain dignity in an impossible situation. He'd aged in the past year. His hair was grayer, his face more lined, his expensive suits unable to hide the weight he'd gained from stress eating. But his eyes still held the same arrogance that had made him so insufferable when he'd been my boss. "Richard," I said, not looking up from the files on my desk, "please, have a seat." He settled into the chair across from me, the same chair where I'd once sat for performance reviews. Listening to him explain why I wasn't ready for promotion, why I needed to be more patient, why leadership required qualities I simply didn't possess. "I've been reviewing your work on the Patterson account," I continued, finally meeting his eyes. "The client is unhappy with the timeline delays, and frankly, so am I." Richard's jaw tightened. The delays weren't my fault. The client kept changing specifications. And the legal team was slow to respond, Richard. My voice was quiet but firm, the tone I'd perfected in countless boardroom negotiations. "I'm not interested in excuses. I'm interested in solutions. Of course, I'll have a revised timeline on your desk by tomorrow morning. Good end, Richard. The client specifically requested that all future communications go through me directly. They've lost confidence in your ability to manage their expectations." I watched the color drain from his face as he processed what this meant. Being removed from client contact was professional death in our industry. It meant he was no longer trusted to represent the company's interests. "Sarah," he said, and I noticed he'd dropped the formal Ms. Chen he'd been using since the acquisition. "I think there might be some misunderstanding. I've been managing the Patterson account for 4 years, and in those 4 years, their satisfaction scores have declined by 30% while their account value has remained flat. Under my guidance, we're going to change that." Richard was quiet for a moment, staring at his hands. When he looked up, there was something different in his expression, not quite defeat, but the recognition that the power dynamic between us had fundamentally shifted. "Is this about the company dinner?" he asked quietly. "About what I said 5 years ago." I leaned back in my chair, studying the man who'd once held my career in his hands. "What do you think, Richard? I think maybe I was wrong about some things. Some things about you, about what makes a good leader." I stood and walked to the window that overlooked the city, the same view Richard had enjoyed when this had been his office. "You were wrong about a lot of things, Richard. You were wrong about my potential, wrong about what clients value, wrong about what this company needed to grow. Sarah, but most of all," I continued, turning back to face him, "you were wrong about what leadership actually means. You thought it was about commanding respect through intimidation, about making people smaller so you could feel bigger. You thought it was about having the loudest voice in the room." Richard was silent, waiting for me to continue. "Real leadership is about making everyone around you better. It's about building people up instead of tearing them down. It's about earning respect through competence and integrity, not demanding it through position and fear." I returned to my desk and picked up Richard's personnel file. "You're a talented analyst, Richard. You always have been. But you confused being in charge with being a leader, and that's why you're sitting in that chair instead of this one. What happens now?" he asked. "Now, you do your job. You deliver excellent work for our clients. You support the team's objectives, and you remember that success isn't a zero-sum game. When the team succeeds, everyone succeeds." Richard nodded slowly. "And if I can't do that, then you'll find yourself looking for a new job. But Richard, I hope it doesn't come to that. I hope you'll take this opportunity to become the professional you always had the potential to be." After he left, I sat alone in my office, thinking about the journey that had brought me here. 5 years ago, Richard Morrison had tried to define my limitations. Instead, he'd given me the motivation to transcend them. Tomorrow, there would be new challenges, new opportunities to prove that leadership wasn't about having the killer instinct to destroy others, but the wisdom to build something better than what came before. 6 months into my new role, I found myself staying late in the office more often than I'd expected. Not because the work was overwhelming, but because I was discovering that leadership came with a loneliness I hadn't anticipated. The same colleagues who'd once invited me for drinks after work now maintained a careful professional distance. The casual conversations by the coffee machine had been replaced by formal meetings and scheduled check-ins. I was reviewing quarterly performance reports when my assistant knocked on the door. "Ms. Chen, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important." "Who is it?" Jennifer Walsh, from the Morrison account team. I knew Jennifer, a bright analyst in her mid-20s who reminded me of myself 5 years ago, ambitious, hardworking, and probably frustrated by the pace of her advancement. Send her in. Jennifer entered nervously, clutching a folder against her chest like armor. She was one of the few people in the office who still looked at me the way they had before my promotion, without the careful deference that had replaced genuine interaction. Ms. Chen, I'm sorry to bother you so late, but I wanted to talk to you about something before I submitted my resignation. Your resignation. I gestured for her to sit down. Jennifer, what's going on? I've been offered a position at Crawford and Associates. It's a lateral move, same salary, but ... double quotes. She hesitated, choosing her words carefully. I think it might be a better fit for my career goals. I set down my pen and gave Jennifer my full attention. Tell me what's really happening. It's Mr. Morrison, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Ever since the restructuring, he's been difficult to work with. He questions everything I do, undermines my recommendations to clients, takes credit for my research. Yesterday, he told me that I should focus on support functions because I don't have the presence for client-facing work. The familiar burn of anger rose in my chest. Richard was doing to Jennifer exactly what he'd done to me, using his experience and position to diminish someone who threatened his ego. Have you documented these incidents? Some of them. But Ms. Chen, I don't want to cause trouble. I know Mr. Morrison has been with the company for a long time, and you're just, what, Jennifer? I'm just a junior analyst? Replaceable. I looked at this young woman who was ready to abandon her career trajectory rather than fight for her place, and I saw myself 5 years ago, talented, ambitious, but convinced that accommodation was safer than confrontation. Jennifer, can I tell you something? When I was your age, I had a boss who told me I'd never lead a team. He said I was too soft, too accommodating, that I lacked the killer instinct for leadership. Jennifer's eyes widened slightly. What did you do? I believed him. For a while. I spent months trying to become harder, more aggressive, more like what I thought a leader should be. But eventually, I realized he was wrong about everything except one thing. What was that? I was too accommodating. Not because accommodation is weakness, but because I was accommodating the wrong things. I was accommodating his insecurity, his need to feel superior. His belief that leadership meant making other people smaller. I stood and walked to the whiteboard where I'd been mapping out the team restructuring. Jennifer, what would you do if you were running the Morrison account? Well, she said hesitantly, I'd start by addressing the client's concerns about communication delays. They've mentioned it in 3 separate meetings, but Mr. Morrison keeps dismissing it as unrealistic expectations. Go on, I'd implement a weekly status update system with clear deliverable timelines and milestone checkpoints. And I'd establish direct communication channels between our technical team and their project managers, so issues get resolved faster. I turned back to Jennifer, noting the confidence that had crept into her voice as she talked about solutions rather than problems. That's exactly what the client needs. So why haven't you proposed it? Because Mr. Morrison said it would be micromanaging and that the client needs to trust our process. And what do you think about that? Jennifer was quiet for a moment, weighing her words. I think Mr. Morrison is more concerned about protecting his authority than serving the client's needs. Then why are you the one considering resignation? The question hung in the air between us. Jennifer stared at her hands, probably realizing that she was about to abandon her career because someone else was failing at theirs. What should I do? She asked finally. That depends. Do you want to be the kind of professional who runs from difficult situations or the kind who solves them? I want to solve them, but I don't know how. I returned to my desk and pulled out a legal pad. First, you're going to document everything. Every conversation, every undermined recommendation, every instance of inappropriate behavior. Dates, times, witnesses, when possible. And then you're going to implement your communication plan for the Morrison account with my authorization. You're going to show the client that we can be responsive to their needs. and you're going to demonstrate the kind of leadership this company values." Jennifer looked uncertain, "But Mr. Morrison will be furious." "Let me worry about Mr. Morrison. Your job is to serve the client and support the team. If someone has a problem with that, they can discuss it with me." After Jennifer left, I sat alone in my office, thinking about the conversation I'd need to have with Richard. This wasn't about revenge or settling old scores. It was about creating an environment where talented people like Jennifer could thrive instead of being driven away by insecure managers. I picked up my phone and dialed Richard's extension. "Richard, it's Sarah. I need to see you in my office first thing tomorrow morning." "Is there a problem?" "Yes," I said. "There is." The next morning, Richard arrived at my office with the defensive posture of someone who knew he was in trouble but wasn't sure why. "Close the door," I said without looking up from my computer. He complied, then sat down across from my desk with the careful stillness of someone trying not to provoke a predator. "Richard, we need to talk about Jennifer Walsh." "What about her?" "She came to me yesterday with her resignation letter. She's been offered a position at Crawford and Associates." Richard's face remained neutral, but I caught the flicker of satisfaction in his eyes. "That's unfortunate. Jennifer's a decent analyst." "Decent?" I finally looked at him directly. "Richard, Jennifer developed the client communication protocol that increased Patterson's satisfaction scores by 40%. She identified the process inefficiencies that saved us 3 weeks on the Morrison timeline. She's not decent, she's exceptional, if you say so." "I do say so. Which is why I'm curious about why an exceptional analyst would want to leave our team." Richard shifted in his chair. "I couldn't say. Maybe she felt the work wasn't challenging enough, or maybe she felt her contributions weren't being valued. Maybe she felt undermined by a supervisor who was more concerned with protecting his own position than developing his team." The silence stretched between us. Richard stared at his hands, probably calculating how much I knew and how much trouble he was in. "Richard, I'm going to be very clear about something. Jennifer Walsh is not leaving this company. She's being promoted to senior analyst, and she'd be taking over primary responsibility for the Morrison account. You can't do that. I've been managing Morrison for 4 years, and in 4 years, you've managed to alienate the client and drive away one of our most promising analysts. That's not management, Richard. That's failure." Richard's face flushed red. "Sarah, you can't just, I can, and I am. Jennifer has the client's confidence, she understands their needs, and she has the skills to deliver results. You'll be supporting her transition and providing whatever assistance she needs. This is about the company dinner, isn't it? About what I said 5 years ago?" I leaned back in my chair, studying the man who still couldn't see past his own wounded pride. "Richard, if this were about the company dinner, you'd already be gone. This is about creating an environment where talented people can succeed, regardless of their age, gender, or willingness to stroke your ego. And if I refuse, then you'll be looking for a new job. But Richard, I hope you'll choose to be part of the solution instead of part of the problem." After he left, I called Jennifer and asked her to come to my office. "Jennifer, I have good news. You're being promoted to senior analyst, effective immediately. You'll be taking over primary responsibility for the Morrison account." The smile that spread across her face reminded me why leadership wasn't about commanding respect through fear, it was about earning it through the success of the people you served. "Thank you, Ms. Chen. I won't let you down. I know you won't. And Jennifer, the next time someone tells you that you don't have what it takes to lead, remember this moment. Remember that the best leaders are the ones who lift others up, not tear them down." 3 months after Jennifer's promotion, I was reviewing the quarterly client satisfaction reports when something caught my attention. The Morrison account wasn't just performing well, it was exceeding every metric we'd established. Client satisfaction had increased by 60%. Project timelines had improved by 3 weeks on average, and most surprisingly, the client had expanded their contract by 40%. But there was something else in the file that made me pause. A handwritten note from Morrison's CEO, specifically requesting that Jennifer be assigned to their new subsidiary accounts. It was the kind of client endorsement that could make a career. I was still processing this when my assistant buzzed in. "Ms. Chen, Mr. Morrison is here. He says he needs to speak with you urgently. Send him in." Richard entered my office looking haggard. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, his tie was crooked, his shirt wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes that suggested he hadn't been sleeping well. "Sarah, we need to talk." "Of course. What's on your mind?" Richard sat down heavily, his usual careful composure replaced by something that looked like desperation. "It's about Jennifer, about the Morrison account." "What about it?" "The client called me yesterday. They want to terminate my involvement entirely. They said they preferred to work exclusively with Jennifer going forward." I kept my expression neutral, though internally I was pleased. This was exactly the kind of client confidence that would accelerate Jennifer's career. "I see. And how do you feel about that?" "How do I feel?" Richard's voice cracked slightly. "Sarah, I've been managing that account for 4 years. It's been my primary responsibility, my biggest success story. Without it, double quotes, without it." "What?" "Without it, I don't have much left here, do I?" The vulnerability in his voice was something I'd never heard before. For the first time since I'd known him, Richard Morrison looked genuinely afraid. "Richard, you have other accounts. The Patterson project, the Hendricks consultation, small accounts, support work. Nothing that demonstrates leadership capability." He looked up at me with something that might have been desperation. "Sarah, I know what this looks like. I know you think I'm getting what I deserve. What do you think you deserve?" Richard was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the city skyline. 5 years ago, I thought I deserved respect because of my position, my experience, my track record. I thought leadership was about being the smartest person in the room, about making sure everyone knew who was in charge. And now I'm watching a 26-year-old analyst accomplish more in 3 months than I accomplished in 4 years. And I'm realizing that maybe I never understood what leadership actually meant. I leaned forward, curious about where this conversation was heading. "What do you think it means now?" "I think it means making other people successful. I think it means creating value for clients instead of protecting your own territory. I think it means—" He paused, struggling with words that clearly didn't come easily. "I think it means admitting when you're wrong and learning from people who are better than you." That's quite a revelation. "Sarah, can I ask you something? When you were working for me, when I was dismissing your ideas and blocking your advancement, did you ever think about leaving? Every day? Why didn't you?" I considered the question, thinking back to those frustrating years when I'd felt trapped by Richard's limitations and my own lack of options. Because I knew that running away wouldn't make me better. It would just put me in a different place with the same problems. I needed to prove to myself that I could succeed despite the obstacles, not just in spite of them. And Jennifer, why didn't she leave when I was making her life difficult? Because I gave her something you never gave me. What was that? Support? Encouragement? The belief that her success mattered more than my ego. Richard nodded slowly, as if pieces of a puzzle were finally falling into place. "Sarah, I need to tell you something I should have told you years ago." "What is it?" "The restructuring plan you proposed 5 years ago, the one I implemented and took credit for, it saved this company. Not just the $2 million in annual costs, but the entire client acquisition process. Without that plan, we would have lost the Morrison account, probably the Patterson account too. I know, Richard, I've always known. I also know that you blocked my promotion 3 times, that you gave my project assignments to less qualified team members, and that you specifically requested that I not be included in client meetings." Richard's face went pale. "How do you know all that?" "Because I made it my business to know. Because understanding the obstacles was the first step to overcoming them. And you never said anything. What would have been the point? Confronting you wouldn't have changed your behavior, it would have just made you more defensive and more determined to limit my opportunities." Richard stared at me with something approaching. "Ah, so you just waited, planned, built your own path around me." "I built my own path through you, Richard. Every obstacle you put in my way became a chance to prove I could handle more responsibility. Every credit you took for my work became evidence that my ideas had value. Every time you tried to diminish me, I used it as motivation to become undeniable." That's brilliant and terrifying. It's strategic. It's what real leadership looks like when you don't have positional authority. Richard was quiet for several minutes, processing what I'd told him. When he finally spoke, his voice was different, smaller, but somehow more genuine. "Sarah, I owe you an apology. Not just for the company dinner, but for everything. For wasting your talent, for blocking your advancement. For being so insecure about my own abilities that I couldn't see yours. Apology accepted." Just like that. Richard, holding grudges is exhausting. It takes energy I'd rather spend on building something better. What happens now? With my career, with my place here. I pulled out a file I'd been preparing for weeks, waiting for this conversation. "That depends on what you want to happen." "What do you mean?" You have a choice. You can continue doing support work, managing small accounts, gradually becoming irrelevant as the industry evolves around you. Or you can do something different, like what I opened the file and spread several documents across my desk. Like leading our new mentorship program. Like using your experience to help junior analysts avoid the mistakes you made. Like becoming the kind of manager you wish you'd had when you were starting out. Richard stared at the document's program outlines, budget projections, organizational charts that showed him in a leadership role focused on developing talent rather than managing accounts. "You want me to train other people to be better than me? I want you to help other people become the best versions of themselves, the way someone should have helped you 20 years ago. But why? After everything I did to you, why would you give me this opportunity?" I thought about the question, about the anger I'd carried for years, and the satisfaction I'd expected to feel when the tables finally turned. But sitting across from Richard now, seeing him genuinely grapple with his failures and limitations, I realized that revenge was far less satisfying than redemption, because everyone deserves the chance to become better than they were. Because the company benefits when we develop talent instead of wasting it. And because I paused, choosing my words carefully. Because 5 years ago, you gave me the motivation I needed to become who I am today. Maybe now I can give you the opportunity to become who you're meant to be. Richard picked up one of the program outlines, scanning the details with the focus of someone seeing possibilities instead of obstacles. This would mean giving up account management entirely, focusing completely on people development. Yes, and you'd trust me with that. After everything, I'd trust you to learn from your mistakes. I'd trust you to understand the damage that bad management can do and to be motivated to prevent it. I'd trust you to remember what it feels like to have your potential dismissed and to make sure it never happens to anyone on your watch. Richard set down the document and looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not gratitude exactly, but something deeper. Recognition, maybe. Respect. "Sarah, can I ask you one more thing?" "Of course. That night at the company dinner, when I said you'd never lead a team, did you know then that you'd prove me wrong?" I smiled, remembering the young woman who'd sat in stunned silence while her boss publicly humiliated her. Who'd gone home that night and made a promise to herself that would change everything. "No, Richard, I didn't know I'd prove you wrong, but I knew I'd die trying." 6 months later, I stood in the conference room watching Richard facilitate his first mentorship workshop. The transformation was remarkable. Gone was the defensive, territorial manager who'd once blocked my advancement, replaced by someone who seemed genuinely invested in developing the next generation of leaders. Leadership isn't about having all the answers, Richard was saying to a group of junior analysts. It's about asking the right questions and creating an environment where the best ideas can emerge, regardless of who has them. Jennifer, now a senior analyst with 3 direct reports of her own, caught my eye and smiled. She'd become one of Richard's strongest advocates for the mentorship program, often sharing how his guidance had helped her navigate the challenges of her new role. Mr. Morrison, one of the participants, asked, "How do you handle it when someone challenges your decisions?" Richard paused, and I could see him considering his answer carefully. "That's an excellent question, and I'll be honest, it's something I struggled with for years. I used to see challenges as threats to my authority. Now I try to see them as opportunities to make better decisions." "Can you give us an example?" Richard glanced toward the back of the room where I was standing, and I nodded encouragingly. "About 6 months ago, I was managing a client account that wasn't performing well. A junior analyst on my team had ideas for improving our approach, but instead of listening to her, I dismissed her suggestions because I felt threatened by them. I was more concerned with protecting my position than serving the client." "What happened?" "The client became increasingly dissatisfied, and the analyst eventually went to our regional director with her concerns. Instead of punishing me for my poor management, the director gave the analyst the authority to implement her ideas. The account not only recovered, but became one of our most successful partnerships." "And how did that make you feel?" Richard smiled ruefully. "Humiliated. At first, angry. I felt like I'd been undermined and embarrassed. But eventually, I realized that the only person who had undermined me was myself. By refusing to listen to good ideas, by prioritizing my ego over results. I'd demonstrated exactly why I shouldn't have been in a leadership position." After the workshop ended, Richard approached me as I was gathering my notes. "Sarah, do you have a few minutes? There's something I'd like to discuss with you." "Of course." We walked to my office, and Richard closed the door behind us, a gesture that had once signaled confrontation, but now suggested confidentiality. "I wanted to update you on the mentorship program metrics," he began, pulling out a folder thick with reports and evaluations. "We've had 23 participants so far, and the feedback has been overwhelmingly positive." "That's excellent. What specific improvements are we seeing?" "Junior analyst retention is up 30%. Internal promotion rates have increased by 40%. And perhaps most importantly, client satisfaction scores for teams with mentorship program participants are consistently higher than those without." I reviewed the data, impressed by both the results and Richard's thorough documentation. "This is outstanding work. Richard, you should be proud of what you've built." "What we've built," he corrected. "This program exists because you saw potential in someone who didn't deserve it and gave them a chance to prove they could change. You earned that chance through your willingness to acknowledge your mistakes and learn from them." Richard sat down across from my desk, his expression serious. "Sarah, I need to tell you something. Something I've been thinking about for months." "What is it?" "I've been offered a position at Meridian's Chicago office. Director of Professional Development for their entire Midwest region. It would mean leaving Hartwell, leaving the team we've built here." I felt an unexpected pang of disappointment. Richard had become not just an effective colleague, but a valuable part of our leadership development strategy. "That sounds like an incredible opportunity." "Congratulations. I haven't accepted it yet." "Why not?" Richard was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. "Because I'm not sure I'm ready. Because I'm afraid that without your guidance, without the accountability structure we've established here, I might revert to my old patterns." "Richard, do you remember what you told the workshop participants about challenges to authority? That they're opportunities to make better decisions? Then let me challenge you now. You're afraid of reverting to old patterns, but what if that fear is exactly what will prevent you from reverting? What if the self-awareness you've developed is the best protection against repeating past mistakes? But what if I fail? What if I get to Chicago and become the same territorial, insecure manager I was before?" I leaned back in my chair, studying the man who'd once been so certain of his superiority that he'd publicly dismissed my potential. The transformation was remarkable, but more importantly, it seemed genuine. "Richard, can I tell you something? 5 years ago, when you said I'd never lead a team, you weren't entirely wrong." "What do you mean?" "I mean the person I was then accommodating, more concerned with being liked than being effective. That person probably wouldn't have been a good leader. But people change. Richard, they grow. They learn from their mistakes and become better versions of themselves. So you think I should take the position? I think you should take it because you're afraid to take it, because the Richard Morrison who would have jumped at the promotion without considering his readiness is gone. The Richard Morrison who's sitting here questioning his abilities, worried about his impact on others, committed to continuous improvement, that's the person Chicago needs. Richard nodded slowly. And if I mess up, if I fall back into old habits, then you'll recognize it, address it, and do better next time. That's what growth looks like, Richard. It's not about never making mistakes. It's about learning from them faster and more effectively. Will you? Would you be willing to serve as a reference, to vouch for my transformation? I'd be honored to. Richard stood to leave, then paused at the door. Sarah, can I ask you one final question? Of course. Do you think you would have become the leader you are today if I hadn't been such a terrible boss? I considered the question, thinking about the path that had brought me to this office. This role, this moment of watching someone I'd once resented become someone I genuinely respected. That's impossible to know for certain. But I can tell you this, adversity didn't make me a better leader, but learning to navigate it with integrity did. Having to prove myself despite obstacles taught me empathy for others facing similar challenges. Watching bad leadership up close showed me exactly what I didn't want to become. So in a strange way, my failures contributed to your success. Your failures taught me what failure looked like, so I could choose something different. But Richard, your transformation is teaching me something even more valuable. What's that? That redemption is possible. That people can change fundamentally, not just superficially. That the worst boss I ever had could become one of the most effective leaders I've ever worked with. After Richard left, I sat alone in my office, thinking about the journey that had brought us both to this point. 5 years ago, I'd been a junior analyst with big dreams and limited opportunities. Richard had been a successful manager with deep insecurities and poor leadership skills. Now I was a regional director overseeing multiple teams and major client relationships. Richard was about to become a director of professional development, responsible for shaping the next generation of leaders across an entire region. We'd both become better versions of ourselves, but in completely different ways. I'd learned to lead through competence and integrity. Richard had learned to lead through humility and service. The irony wasn't lost on me that the man who'd once told me I'd never lead a team was now preparing to teach others how to lead. But perhaps that was the most powerful lesson of all, that our greatest failures can become our most valuable qualifications if we're willing to learn from them. My phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. Heard about Mr. Morrison's promotion. Are you okay with him leaving? I typed back. I'm proud of him for earning it. Even after everything he put you through. I thought about my response for a moment, then typed, especially because of everything he put me through. Sometimes the people who challenge us the most end up teaching us the most about ourselves. Outside my window, the city lights were beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. Somewhere out there, young professionals were sitting in meetings with bosses who didn't believe in their potential, facing the same choice I'd faced 5 years ago, to let dismissal define their limitations or use it as motivation to transcend them. Tomorrow, Richard would submit his resignation and begin preparing for his new role in Chicago. Jennifer would continue building her client portfolio and developing her own leadership style. And I would keep doing what I'd learned to do best, creating opportunities for talented people to succeed, regardless of their background, their age, or their willingness to conform to someone else's expectations. The company dinner where Richard had dismissed my potential felt like a lifetime ago, but in a way, it had been the beginning of everything, not just my own transformation, but his as well. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do for someone who underestimates you is prove them wrong so thoroughly that they're forced to reconsider everything they thought they knew about leadership, potential, and the possibility of change. 2 years later, I received an invitation that made me smile. Richard Morrison was being honored at the Midwest Leadership Excellence Awards for his innovative mentorship programs at Meridian Capital. The ceremony was being held in Chicago, and he'd specifically requested that I attend as his guest. I almost declined. My schedule was packed with the demands of running what had become the most successful regional division in Meridian's portfolio. But something about the invitation, handwritten in Richard's careful script, made me reconsider. "Sarah," it read, "I know you're incredibly busy, but it would mean the world to me if you could be there. This award belongs as much to you as it does to me. You taught me that the best leaders are the ones who create other leaders. I hope I'm finally learning to do that." So I found myself in the ballroom of the Chicago Marriott, watching Richard accept an award for excellence in professional development. He looked different, more confident, but less arrogant, more authoritative, but less defensive. The transformation that had begun in my office 2 years ago had clearly continued. "When I started my career," Richard said from the podium, "I thought leadership was about being the smartest person in the room, about commanding respect through position and authority. I spent years trying to prove I belonged at the top by keeping other people at the bottom." The audience was silent, hanging on his words. But I had the privilege of working with someone who showed me what real leadership looks like. She never tried to tear me down, even when I deserved it. Instead, she gave me the opportunity to build myself back up, not as the person I had been, but as the person I could become. I felt my cheeks warm as several people in the audience turned to look at me. "True leadership," Richard continued, "isn't about proving you're better than everyone else. It's about helping everyone else become better than they thought possible. It's about creating an environment where talent can flourish, where good ideas can emerge from anywhere, where success is measured not by what you achieve, but by what you enable others to achieve." After the ceremony, Richard found me at the reception, his award tucked under his arm and a genuine smile on his face. "Sarah, thank you for coming. It means more than you know. Congratulations, Richard. You've built something remarkable here. We've built something remarkable. The mentorship model, the leadership development framework, it all started with what you taught me back in Hartford. What I taught you was already inside you. You just needed permission to let it out." Richard laughed. "Permission and a significant amount of humbling. The best leaders are the ones who've learned from their failures. You've just learned more thoroughly than most." We found a quiet corner of the reception hall, away from the networking and congratulations, and Richard's expression grew more serious. "Sarah, I need to tell you something I've been wanting to say for 2 years, but never found the right moment." "What is it?" "That night at the company dinner, when I said you'd never lead a team, I wasn't just wrong about you. I was wrong about everything. About what leadership means, about what makes someone worthy of respect, about what success actually looks like." "Richard, please, let me finish. I've been thinking about this for years, and I need to say it properly." He took a breath. "You didn't just prove me wrong about your potential. You proved me wrong about my own. You showed me that the qualities I dismissed as weaknesses, empathy, collaboration, genuine care for other people's success, those are actually the foundations of great leadership. And what did you think leadership was before? I thought it was about winning, about being right, being first, being recognized. I thought it was a competition where someone had to lose for me to win. And now I know it's about service, about making other people successful, about creating value that extends far beyond your own achievements, about building something that will continue to grow and improve long after you're gone." I looked around the reception hall, filled with people whose careers had been shaped by Richard's mentorship programs, and I understood what he meant. "Richard, can I tell you something? That night at the company dinner changed my life too." "How so?" "It forced me to define what kind of leader I wanted to become. Not in reaction to your dismissal, but in response to it. I could have become bitter, vindictive, determined to prove my worth by diminishing others. Instead, I chose to prove my worth by elevating others. Is that why you gave me a second chance? To prove a point about forgiveness, I gave you a second chance because I believed you could change. Because I'd seen glimpses of the leader you could become." buried underneath the insecurity and defensiveness, because, I paused, choosing my words carefully, because the best revenge against someone who underestimates you isn't destroying them, it's helping them become someone who would never make that mistake again. Richard was quiet for a moment, processing what I'd said. So you were playing a longer game. I was playing a better game. One where everyone could win if they were willing to grow. And if I hadn't been willing to grow, then you would have remained exactly what you were, a cautionary tale about wasted potential. But you chose differently, Richard. You chose to become someone worthy of the opportunities you'd been given. As the evening wound down, Richard walked me to the hotel lobby where my car was waiting. Sarah, I have one last question for you. What's that? Do you ever regret not destroying me when you had the chance? When you became my boss, you could have made my life miserable, forced me out, gotten the revenge that most people would have considered justified. I thought about the question, about the path not taken, about the satisfaction I might have felt from watching Richard's career crumble under the weight of his own arrogance. No, I said finally. I don't regret it. Because destroying you would have made me smaller, not stronger. It would have validated your worst assumptions about leadership, that it's about power over others rather than power with others. And this way, we both became better than we were. You learned to lead through service instead of dominance. I learned to lead through transformation instead of transaction. The company benefited, our teams benefited, and hopefully, the people we mentor will carry these lessons forward to the next generation. Richard extended his hand, then thought better of it and pulled me into a brief, professional hug. Thank you, Sarah, for everything. For seeing potential where others saw problems. For believing in redemption when punishment would have been easier. For teaching me that the best leaders are the ones who create other leaders. As my car pulled away from the hotel, I watched Richard through the rear window. Standing in the lobby with his award, surrounded by colleagues and mentees who clearly respected and admired him. It was a far cry from the insecure, territorial manager who'd once dismissed my potential at a company dinner. The drive to the airport gave me time to reflect on the journey that had brought us both to this point. 7 years ago, Richard Morrison had tried to define my limitations. Instead, he'd given me the motivation to transcend them, and in the process, he'd discovered his own capacity for transformation. Sometimes, the greatest gift you can give someone who underestimates you isn't proving them wrong, but helping them become someone who would never make that mistake again. The most powerful leadership isn't about commanding respect, but about earning it by helping others become the best versions of themselves.